Imagine a time when the idea of walking on the moon sounded like pure science fiction. Rockets were new, computers were massive and slow, and space was still a mystery. Yet in less than a decade, humanity went from barely leaving Earth to standing on another world. This is the story of Apollo 11, the mission that turned the impossible into reality. It all began during the height of the Cold War. The United States and the Soviet Union were locked in a fierce competition known as the space race. Each side wanted to prove its technological and scientific superiority. The Soviets had early victories, launching the first satellite, Sputnik, and sending the first human, Yuri Gagarin, into space. The United States needed a bold goal, something that would not just catch up, but leap ahead. In 1961, President John F. Kennedy made a daring promise. America would land a man on the moon and return him safely to Earth before the end of the decade. At the time, this goal seemed almost impossible. NASA didn't yet have the technology, the experience, or even a clear plan. But they had determination. Over the next 8 years, thousands of engineers, scientists, and astronauts worked tirelessly. They tested rockets, built spacecraft, and learned through both success and failure. Some missions went wrong. Lives were lost, but each step brought them closer. Finally, in July 1969, everything was ready. The spacecraft Apollo 11 sat atop the massive Saturn V rocket, the most powerful machine ever built at the time. Inside were 3 astronauts, Neil Armstrong, Buzz Aldrin, and Michael Collins. On July 16, 1969, millions of people around the world watched as the rocket engines ignited. Flames and smoke poured out beneath the rocket as it slowly lifted off the ground. Humanity was on its way to the moon. The journey wasn't simple. Apollo 11 had to travel about 384,000 kilometers through space. Inside the spacecraft, the astronauts lived in tight quarters, surrounded by controls, instruments, and the constant hum of machinery. After reaching Earth's orbit, the spacecraft performed a critical maneuver. It broke free from orbit and began its path toward the moon. This phase was called translunar injection. For 3 days, they traveled through the silence of space. No air, no sound, just the vast emptiness beyond Earth. As they approached the moon, the spacecraft separated. Michael Collins stayed in orbit aboard the command module, circling the moon alone. Meanwhile, Neil Armstrong and Buzz Aldrin entered the lunar module, a fragile-looking craft designed specifically for landing. They named it Eagle. The descent to the moon was one of the most dangerous parts of the mission. The computer began giving unexpected alarms. Fuel levels were dropping, and the landing area was filled with rocks. With seconds of fuel remaining, Neil Armstrong took manual control. Carefully, he guided the Eagle away from danger. Then, finally, the words came through. The Eagle has landed. At that moment, humanity had reached the moon, but the most iconic moment was still to come. A few hours later, Neil Armstrong climbed down the ladder of the lunar module. As he stepped onto the surface, he said the words that would echo through history. That's one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind. For the first time ever, a human stood on another world. Buzz Aldrin joined him shortly after. Together, they spent about 2.5 hours exploring the moon's surface. They collected samples, took photographs, and set up scientific experiments. They described the landscape as silent, gray, and almost unreal, like a desert frozen in time. Meanwhile, back on Earth, over 600 million people watched the event live on television. It was one of the largest shared moments in human history. After completing their mission on the surface, Armstrong and Aldrin returned to the lunar module. They launched back into orbit and reunited with Michael Collins. Now, the final challenge, getting home. The journey back to Earth took another 3 days. As they approached the planet, the spacecraft re-entered Earth's atmosphere at incredibly high speeds. Temperatures outside the capsule reached thousands of degrees. Then, parachutes deployed. Splashdown. Apollo 11 had successfully completed its mission. The astronauts were safely recovered from the ocean and welcomed back as heroes. But Apollo 11 was more than just a mission. It changed the way humanity saw itself. For the first time, we looked back at Earth from another world, a small, fragile blue sphere floating in the darkness. It reminded us that borders and conflicts are tiny compared to the vastness of space. The mission also pushed technology forward in ways that still impact our lives today. Advances in computing, materials, telecommunications, and engineering all grew from the challenges of reaching the moon. And perhaps most importantly, Apollo 11 proved something powerful, that humans can achieve extraordinary things when they work together toward a shared goal. After Apollo 11, more missions followed. Humans returned to the moon several times. Space exploration continued with space stations, robotic missions, and eventually plans for Mars. Even today, the legacy of Apollo 11 lives on. It inspires new generations of scientists, engineers, and dreamers to look up at the sky and ask, what's next? Because Apollo 11 wasn't just about reaching the moon. It was about showing that no dream is too far and no goal is out of reach. And maybe, just maybe, the next giant leap is already on its way.